Welcome back to the Reading Room. I'm Josh Bearheart Hawk, author of The Journal, Legends and Tales, Creepy and Fun Stories to Tell Around the Campfire, and my upcoming novel, GPS Signal Lost. By the time this comes out, it's going to be pretty close to a release date because that's coming out on April 26th. You can check that as well as all my other books out over on Amazon, where you can pick up paperback and ebook copies. You can get them on my website, where you can get a paperback signed copy. And ebooks are pretty much available at most places, Barnes & Noble, bunch of other stores. Pretty much anywhere you can pick up an ebook, you can pick up most of my ebooks. So today we're going to be reading The Journal. We're on to chapter 7. We are on a series where we're reading through the entire thing. We're going to be doing the same thing for all of my books. Legends and Tales is going to be coming up as one, and then GPS Signal Lost over the summer is going to be coming up. So if that's something you're interested in, make sure to hit the subscribe button so that you don't miss out. If this is your first time on the channel, you can watch starting from the beginning of this series. If you want to start with chapter 1, I'll put the playlist. I think it's on this side. I'll put a playlist up there so that you can go start with chapter 1 and you can kind of listen through. I'll be talking a little bit about the books themselves, a little bit about sometimes my thoughts depending on what the chapter's about. Chapter 6 was the last one we read. Chapter 6 was a journal entry. So that it was basically Heath talking a little bit about the job that he got and the missing person that they're looking for and that kind of thing. So we're going to be moving on today to chapter 7. We're moving right through pretty quick here. Chapter 7 is actually one of my favorite chapters. I think it's one of the ones that really starts to kind of pick up the story. And it's a Heath chapter, and it's called The Red Dress. So let's go ahead and get started with chapter 7. Heath pulled his old car into the nearly full lot of the Southside Diner as the August sun reminded him of why he liked working at night. He really didn't want to be here, but James' promise to the desperate mother yesterday had forced him to do a lot of things he didn't really want to do. For instance, he had yelled at his surrogate father and used some words better left out of the dictionary in the hope that they could put this whole job in the rearview mirror and get on with their lives. When his words of frustration were met with a calm and decisive counter, he found himself heading back to the office to fill Samantha in on the details and asked her to reach out to the new client to arrange payment. Rather than getting to bed at a decent time and waking for an early morning jog, he had spent the majority of the night planning his investigation and leaving messages with a half-dozen investigators he knew in the Northern Ohio region, asking for any information at all on a girl matching the description of the missing daughter. Finding a spot to park near the back of the lot, Heath shut off the engine and rolled the windows almost all the way up before getting out and heading for the restaurant. He briefly imagined himself roaming through a desert as he approached the oasis that was the air-conditioned dining room. Walking through the door was like being hit with an Arctic blast, shocking him out of his fantasy and reminding him why he was there. Dee, who was the mother of the missing girl, Persephone, had mentioned this diner as a place that her daughter had talked about several times in their conversations. This was apparently the cool place to hang out during the summer months, with Persephone telling her mother that she and her friends would grab a bite to eat here a few times a week before heading out to one of the local cemeteries or parks to smoke and drink. As he surveyed the menu, Heath also glanced around the room, sizing up the patrons and listening for anything that might warrant some digging. Sitting at the counter, the two young lovers shared a milkshake, eyes locked like they were going to jump on each other at any moment. They were being watched by a teen further down who was probably imagining himself punching the guy and taking his place. A corner booth was occupied by a group of teens who were laughing at everything their leather jacket-wearing friend was saying. A few other tables were taken up with families probably enjoying a break from the heat more than the food, as many appeared to have emptied their plates long ago. If anyone here knew something about Persephone, it wasn't obvious to the casual observer. Looking back at his menu as the waitress made her way back to his table, Heath decided on the southern steak and sweet tea. Before she could take his order to the kitchen, he motioned for her to come a little closer so he could ask her something. "Miss, I was just wondering if you might know anything about a girl who used to hang out here with a group of friends. she was probably a regular up until about 6 months ago, had light brown hair, and would have gone by Persephone or maybe a similar nickname. "I'm sorry, but I've only been here a few weeks. I could ask some of the other waitresses who may have been here longer, but I think most of the staff is pretty new. Is this girl in some kind of trouble?" Her brow furrowed, and she gave a look of helplessness. "That's what I'm trying to figure out. Her mother has been looking for her and is afraid something might have happened. If you could ask around, that would be extremely helpful. Any small detail could lead to a big break." He felt as if he'd been doing this for years. She nodded and told him she would see if anyone had any information, then made her way back with his order. Even if he didn't get any leads, it was possible that just asking around would get gossip started, and he knew that once the town started to talk, someone would eventually say something. The waitress returned with his food much quicker than he expected, and reported that no one recalled seeing the girl he described. He thanked her for her help and enjoyed his late lunch, continuing to watch the inhabitants of the dining room as he ate. A few people came and went, but nothing stuck out as suspicious. The check arrived as he finished his last bite. As he was pulling out the money to pay, he noticed there was something scribbled on the back. 8:30 p.m. I'll call your office. I know her. Looking around for the waitress, she was nowhere to be seen, and he had no way of knowing if it was her that left the note or someone else. He left the money and went to his car, looking around as he walked out to see if anyone was staring in his direction. As he climbed in the car, he felt confident that no one was watching him, but he also had an overwhelming feeling of excitement. Maybe he would be able to crack this case and get some resolution quicker than he thought. Of course, there was also the feeling of dread that lingered in the back of his mind. What if the resolution of the case didn't involve a happy reunion of mother and daughter? Returning to the office, Heath would find Samantha and James sitting in the back room talking about the case. After finding out that James had received the expected runaround from the police, he relayed what had happened at the diner. Samantha, who didn't normally get invested in cases, was grinning from ear to ear as she set up the phone to play over a speaker and record the upcoming call. "What are you so happy about?" Heath suspected he knew the answer, but he had to ask. "Most of your cases involve these boring items that I don't really care much about. This one is actually interesting, though. A missing girl, a mysterious phone call, and this air of excitement that the case could be broken open at any moment. This is the most fun I've had with the case in years." She was almost too bubbly for Heath's liking, but he had to admit she had a point. He loved looking for relics, the thrill of the chase and all that came with it, but this was something different. With the missing object, there wasn't usually a hurry to find it. The clients wanted quick retrievals, when possible, but if something took an extra week or two longer than expected, there wasn't really any consequence. With this case, it was starting to feel like every minute was important, like the life of Persephone hung in the balance, and if they delayed by even a second, she might not make it. This was all assuming the best case scenario, though. "So what do you plan to say?" James asked as he walked back in the room with a box of cables that Samantha had sent him to retrieve. "I'm not sure yet. For all I know, this could just be a prank that one of the staff decided to pull. It'll be hard to trust any information we get, but that's why we're setting up to record the call. If the caller does have some pertinent information, I want to have it on tape to cover us down the road." Heath glanced over at the clock as he said this, knowing they were only about an hour away from the call, and needed to get everything done in time to run a test. Samantha had suggested this recording setup a few months back for cases where they might need some extra insurance. They had an old reel system that Heath used to record recaps up until about a year prior, when he decided that reels took up a lot more space than a journal would. This was the first time the equipment was being used to record a call, and there was no way to know if it would actually work as planned. When all the connections were in place, James went across the street and called the office from a payphone on the corner. Samantha started the recording and Heath answered the call. After a brief, sarcastic exchange of pleasantries, The call and recording were both ended. Rewinding the reel, the playback worked better than they expected, capturing every word as if the call was still ongoing. Confident in the setup, the trio waited for the call. At 8:30 on the dot, the phone began to ring. Heath glanced nervously at Samantha as she pressed the button to start the recording. Reaching down to grab the receiver, Heath took a deep breath and picked up the receiver. "Hello?" A male voice responded. "Is this Heath Borgiers?" "This is Heath. I understand you have some information that might help us find Persephone." "Yes, I have information about Persephone, but I couldn't share it at the diner because there were too many people around. She's alive, or at least she was alive when I saw her a month ago." The voice started out shaky, but seemed to gain some confidence as he spoke. "Where did you see her?" Heath was trying to hide the excitement at the news that she'd been seen alive so recently. "You have to understand, I had nothing to do with her going missing. I'm only reaching out because you told Tiffany that Persephone's mom was worried about her, and I don't want her mom to worry. I know the guys that took her, and I know where they're holding her. They do this more often than anyone realizes, but usually they take people who are passing through and won't be missed. We all look the other way because we have to. The police don't care. When I saw her, she was in the back seat of one of the guys' cars, sitting in the parking lot of the diner. She had on this beautiful red dress and some fancy-looking pearls, as if she'd been out at a dance or something." His voice trailed off, almost as if he'd moved the phone away from his mouth as he said the last few words. Heath had so many questions, but he had the feeling the call would not go on long enough to get them all answered. As his mind raced, he settled on the one question he thought would bring the most help. Whose car was she in? "The guy's name is Alex Young." A click signaled the call had been ended by the man, and Samantha stopped the recording when she realized there was nothing else to be heard. The three sat in silence for several minutes, unsure of the next move. I'm not sure we're equipped to handle this case anymore," James said. The enthusiasm from the only an hour earlier was gone in his voice. This was bigger than any of them had imagined. "We can't just give up on it. What are we supposed to tell Dee? We know Persephone was alive a month ago. We know who she was with. What we don't know for sure is whether she was there willingly or not." Heath looked back and forth from Samantha to James, hoping one of them would have some answer. In truth, none of them knew what they were doing. Was finding this girl worth risking their lives? Maybe she was with them voluntarily. After all, Dee had come to them and given her side of things, but they had no way of knowing the full truth. One thing Heath did know for sure was that he now had a name to work with, and he had found a lot more with a lot less on other jobs. After a couple hours of attempting to sleep, Heath was still wide awake. His mind was racing with thoughts about the case. From questioning the story Dee had told them about wondering how much had been true. From questioning the story Dee had told them to wondering how much had been true in the story the mysterious caller had shared. It was true that the police had been less than helpful, but the implications of them turning a blind eye to what amounted to a kidnapping ring were too much for him to fully consider. The morning sun came in through the bedroom window, meaning the rest of the world would be finally awake with him, and he could start tracking down Alex Young. After a quick shower and shave, he started with checking the phone book for the name, hoping he might get lucky. When that didn't work out, he started calling his local contacts in Knox County, finally getting the information he needed by mid-morning from a former judge who was familiar with the name. The address came with a warning, though. "Be careful, Heath. Alex isn't really a bad guy, but if he is pushed too hard, he could wind up putting you in a tough spot." Heath didn't plan on pushing, but he needed to at least follow this lead. James insisted on riding with Heath up to the house, and Samantha threatened to call the FBI if she didn't hear something from the men within a few hours. As they drove up the gravel road to the address the judge provided, Heath did his best to suppress the fear he was feeling, telling himself that things were going to go smoothly. As the car came to a stop in front of the house, a man in overalls came out the front door to greet them. He had a friendly smile on his face, but Heath still felt like something was off. "Hey, is there something I can help y'all with?" "We sure hope so. My name is Heath, and this is my partner, James. We're looking for Mr. Alex Young." "Well, you found him. What can I do for you?" Alex held out his hand, and Heath shook it. "I'm a private investigator of sorts, and I've been hired to find a young woman by the name of Persephone who's been missing for about 6 months. We received a tip that she may have been with you a few weeks ago, and we just wanted to follow up on it and see if you knew where she might be." "Oh yeah, I know Steffi. We used to date, but I haven't seen her in about 3 weeks or so. She said she needed some space after a fight we had, and she was heading out west to visit family or something." His eyes were locked on Heath's, and his smile hadn't faded since they arrived. "So she left and you haven't seen her at all in 3 weeks? Is there anyone else locally that you know that could back that up?" Heath wasn't sure where he was going with this, but he wanted to make every second count, as he may or may not get the chance to ask more questions later. What law enforcement outfit did y'all say you were with?" "Not law enforcement, just a private investigator. Trying to help a mother find her missing daughter." Heath could feel that Alex was closing up. "Well, it was just me and her out here for the past few months, and no one was around when she left. I can't really be of much help, I'm afraid. You all should head out and maybe check in California or something." Alex finally took his gaze off Heath and stared at James as he said this. "Well, thank you for your help. We'll check out west then." Heath struggled to get the words out as his stomach twisted in knots. Turning back to the car, he and James exchanged a look that said they both knew that there was something else here. As they backed out of the driveway, Heath noticed a barn behind the house that he hadn't seen when they pulled up. Normally, a barn in rural Ohio wouldn't stand out to him, but there was something hanging off the door that caught his eye. Blowing in the wind, as if placed there intentionally for him to see, was a bright red dress. So that's the end of chapter 7. It's a little bit longer chapter, but we get a lot of new information in there, and we kind of figure out, what's going on with this Alex Young character, and raise some more questions. What's going on with the barn, and we're going to find that out here in not too distant future. The one thing I wanted to talk about with this chapter was at the beginning when I mentioned the Southside Diner, and that was one that it's still, as far as I know, it's still around in Mount Vernon. I grew up in Mount Vernon, so I used some reference points and that kind of thing from the area, and that's part of the reason why the story takes place where it does in Knox County, because I wanted to kind of pay homage to the place that I grew up, and a place that isn't mentioned a lot in popular culture and stuff because it's such a small area. But the Southside Diner was a big one that I wanted to mention because that was a place that I'd been to as a kid. That, like I said, I think you can still go there. As far as I know, they're still open. But it's been around for a long, long time. But yeah, so that's chapter 7. Next week, we're going to be getting into chapter 8, which I believe is another Josh chapter. Yeah. So chapter 8 is another Josh chapter, and it's going to be kind of getting a little bit more into kind of digging into the mystery of what's going on with Josh and what he's uncovering about Heath and that kind of stuff. So make sure you subscribe if you want to. If you're interested in that, that should show up here at the end of the video. As far as I know, as long as I have it out, whenever it comes out, we'll put it at the end of the video. How's that? Otherwise, you can go back and you can watch the full playlist if you haven't watched the other chapters but yet, or if there's another video out, if there's another series, if we've started Legends and Tales or GPS Signal Lost, those will all be there. If you want to help support the channel, if you like what you see and maybe you want to get some behind the scenes stuff or some early access kind of stuff, you can go check out Patreon. You get your name in the video and all that kind of cool stuff. So that's another way to kind of help support the channel. So I want to thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Like I said, next week's gonna be chapter 8. So I hope you all have a great rest of your day, and I will see you in the next one.